Hey everyone, welcome to another segment of Michigan Conservative Roundtable. My name's TJ, gun guy of the group, and today's video is going to be the lost art. The lost art being the proper handling of a revolver. And before I begin, I'd like to just remind everyone, obey all gun laws, observe gun safety, and be a good ambassador of the shooting sport. I'd also like to mention the single shot cowboy shooters. They will most certainly inform me that they're the master of the lost art. So just a shout out to those guys. Yes, you guys are. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to take the modern day application of the revolver and just go over a few things, because there are some definite do's and don'ts here. A lot of the younger guys, I've talked to them at the range, they're into the semi-autos. They're slick, they're sleek, they're sexy. And I've had a couple even say to me that us old timers can get into the revolvers, but it's not for them. And because of this, I just feel like it's less and less people are shooting revolvers, and to me it is becoming a lost art. So I'd just like to go over a few things here, my thoughts. And if you notice, I'm holding the gun like this, because you will see in this video that your support hand is just as important as your shooting hand. I'm a right-handed shooter. For this video, we have this, and we also have a 5-shot Taurus 38. Okay? And a lot of guys will get this as a home defense gun. I've heard it referred to as a belly gun. But in regards to this for home defense, first rule of a gunfight is you got to have a gun. So that would serve just fine. This particular model, and I'm going to hold it like this, what you're looking at, this is a Smith & Wesson, and this is the result of a collaborative effort of a man by the name of Bill Jordan and Smith & Wesson. And when Smith & Wesson came out with the 357s, some thought that they were too heavy, and Smith & Wesson went to Bill Jordan, and they said to Bill Jordan, what is your ideal carry revolver? At that time, semis had really not gone mainstream, so almost all law enforcement was carrying revolvers. And Bill Jordan, with his thoughts on what a revolver should be like, using his thoughts, Smith & Wesson made the Model 19 Combat Magnum, which is what this is. 4-shot nickel. They don't make nickel anymore because it was deemed not very tactical, but in any event, this is a Model 19 Smith & Wesson. Other revolvers you will find in 22 long rifle, 41, 44, 45 long Colt, and I've even seen a guy with a 30 carbine revolver. Nothing against, this video is going to be primarily 38 357, nothing against the other calibers. It's just that when you get into the 41, 44, 45 long Colt, they're going to be very expensive to shoot, and if they're that expensive to shoot, if you're not independently wealthy, how are you going to afford to practice? If you fail to practice, then how can you master it? If you can't master it, why are you carrying it? Okay? So, what I'd like to also do now is talk about the 38 and 357. Here we have a 38 bullet, and from what my research told me is initially when this caliber came out, they measured the casing. The casing was determined to be .379. They rounded up and called it the 38. Even by today's standards, a 38 velocity is somewhere around 750, maybe 800 feet per second. So it moves pretty slow compared to the other calibers. As time progressed, technological advances and whatnot, better powder, better projectiles, they did get it a little bit more oomph out of it, and they called it a 38 special, but it was still deemed lacking in stopping power. So at the behest of law enforcement, they came out with this. And what they did was they measured the diameter of the projectile, and it measured out to 0.357. So thus you have the 357 Magnum and you have the 38. And I'm going to hold it like this, and you're going to see that the 357 is a little bit longer than the 38. That was done intentionally. Now, both the 38 and 357 shoot the same bullet. You could take these bullet heads and swap them. Where the difference lies is that the 357 produces a much greater power, more power is generated in the casing than what is in the 38. And they intentionally made the 357 longer so that you could not inadvertently put a 357 into a 38. If you were to shoot a 357 into a 38, the results would be catastrophic. Obviously, you destroy the firearm and you probably injure yourself. So the 357 casing was intentionally made longer than the 38. 357, what I suggest to people is, and if you notice, you see how I'm holding it? This is how you need to get into the habit of holding it like this, okay? And the 357, my father last year bought a revolver, a Ruger 357 LCR light combat revolver. And upon my suggestion, I told him to get a 357, not that he was going to treat it like a 357. But you get a 357, and you're able to go from the light end to the heavy end, hot end of a 38 in the 357, and then if you want, you can still go to the Magnum of the 357 power. And so what I told my dad to do was get light 38s and train, and with the light 38s, you'll have a little bit of a recoil, but it won't be bad. And so then at which point, as you practice, you basically go to the hotter 38 plus P, and then if you want, as you progress, then you can go to the full power 357. A lot of times I've heard the Magnum revolvers, well, Magnum handguns in particular, they call them the flinch maker. So if you do get a revolver, you got to start with the light loads first. Flinching is what occurs when the shooter anticipates the recoil, and then once you start flinching, now your shots are all over the place. I'd like to show you what I have here. This is an HKS speed loader. And they have different types of speed loaders, so you need to make sure you get the proper speed loader for whatever model you have, okay? And this thing twists, and it allows you to put them in, lock them in place, and I'm a big advocate of these, okay? And for training purposes, and this is to the exact specifications of 38 cartridge, to include there's a rubbery center, because a lot of times firing pins falling on an empty chamber, it's not exactly the best for some of the firing pins, especially the older firearms. So anyways, if you're going to practice dry firing, you might want to use snap caps too. All right, these snap caps were made by Pockmeyer snap caps. So, like I said, get in the habit of holding the weapon in your left hand like this. And what you're going to want to do is, whether you use the speed loader or whether you do it individually, but that's what you're going to do. Okay? Then once you have it loaded, you're going to close it and then come up. So that what happens is, and now I'm going to use the speed loaders. Make sure you keep the barrel pointed downward, because you will need the assistance of gravity. Turn it. See how they dropped in? Close it. Shoot. Then when you go to reload, you're going to pop it out, and this is important. When you go to reload, and I'm going to show this side here. You're going to hit the release, the cylinder release, and with these two fingers, you're going to push that cylinder out. Your index finger is going to come over top. Your baby finger is going to come over the barrel or over the hammer. And that's how you're going to have the weapon in your hand. This allows the thumb to hit the plunger. Okay? Now, if you're shooting some hot 38s, and they're normally I never have any problems with the nickel brass, but sometimes if you use the other brass, they do tend to expand a little bit. So sometimes you do like this and they hang up, come across forcefully. Then from there, you're going to do this. I always go with my primary speed loaders here, whether I be left or right-handed shooter, because what happens is, and I'm just, even though this is empty, I'm going to simulate. You have your weapon like this, you come up and out, you stick it in, turn it, and what I've always done is I've always practiced throwing in this. Make it a one fluid motion. Put it in, you're going to turn it, release, come around, and then you're up and ready to shoot. Okay? And then when you go to reload, and I know a lot of times I've seen police officers back in the day, they had their bullets in their belt. And then what they would do is, if they had to reload, they'd be doing this. Okay? Now, there are a couple things about the revolver, do's and don'ts. One of the drawbacks to the revolver is, and this is double action or single action, which means you can either go double or single. Okay? Now, I don't encourage people to make a habit of shooting single action. This particular handgun has a rear sight, which you can adjust for windage and elevation. Little screws here. I know you can't see it, but there's a screw here and a screw there for adjusting the sight. That is really about the only time I've ever fired this single action. The rest of the time I've gone straight double action. But what do you do if you have cocked the revolver and all of a sudden you realize, I didn't want to shoot? And so what if you're not at a range? What if you're really not exactly as safe? Well, you shouldn't have cocked it to begin with, but what are you going to do to decock this thing? The way I was trained is you take your support hand, the thumb of your support hand, and you're going to stick it there between the hammer and where it's going to fall into the bore. Okay? And then you hit the trigger and you're going to slowly release the hammer. That is the only way you can decock a revolver. I'm going to do it again. It's cocked, and then you slowly release it. Okay? Now, again, you see I'm holding it this way. When you go to reload it, and I'm going to show you one of the worst things. I'm going to show you one of the worst things you can do to a revolver. In fact, if you do it in a gun store, the guy's liable to jump over the counter and wrap you on the head. Okay? You see it in the movies. The guy's reloaded. He spins it and does what they call the Hollywood snap. And that is so hard on this one particular piece. It's called the crane. Never do the Hollywood snap. That's why I'm saying, once you reload, bring your hand around, close it, and then you're ready to go. The reason being, you got the cylinder, you got the bore of the cylinder, there's 6 bores here, crane, forcing cone to the barrel. And if you do the Hollywood snap enough, you will begin to wear this piece out. And this piece is very important because this is the only piece that holds the cylinder in its place, both if you were reloading, and as you close it. And if you do not have perfect alignment between the bore and the forcing cone of the barrel, well, you could have problems. If you ever have the opportunity to shoot a revolver at night, you will see gases escaping here and here. And that's normal, unavoidable. But if you damage the crane, that's going to make it even worse, to the point where you could really screw the firearm up. In Hollywood, you see them putting a sound suppressor on the revolver. That's not real, because all it does is make more gases escape here, and it probably isn't even good for the revolver. So, just to review, get in the habit of holding it like this. You're gonna load it this way, whether it be singly by hand or by speed loader. Close it up, empty, and that about wraps up. I hope you found this video enlightening, informative. Remember, obey all gun laws, observe gun safety, be a good ambassador to the sport, and as we like to say here on the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.